There's a precise moment when you realize you've become the villain in your own life story. For me, it wasn't when I first betrayed my marriage vows in the corner office on the 32nd floor. It wasn't even when my 13-year-old daughter looked at me with the kind of disappointment usually reserved for genocidal dictators and people who talk during movies. No, my moment came on a Tuesday afternoon as I sat in my car in the parking garage staring at a cardboard box containing 6 years of professional achievements and one Spider-Man mug my daughter gave me when she still believed I was capable of saving anything. Let me back up. My name is Daniel Mercer. Until recently, I was the marketing director at Archer Industries, a company that makes, well, it doesn't really matter what we made. What matters is that I was good at selling it, good enough to catch the attention of Catherine Archer herself, CEO and founder of the company that bears her name. Catherine has been featured in Forbes' 40 Under 40, profiled in Business Insider as the future of female leadership, and more relevantly to my story voted most likely to devour your soul and use your bones for jewelry by the employees who managed to escape her gravitational pull. Not that I knew any of this 6 months ago. Back then, I was just a guy with a decent salary, a wife who still laughed at my jokes even after 15 years, and a teenage daughter who occasionally acknowledged my existence in public. The American dream in its modest, modern incarnation. The trouble began at last year's holiday party, that corporate ritual where everyone pretends that 3 gin and tonics will magically transform hierarchical workplace relationships into genuine human connections. I was hovering near the hors d'oeuvre table, constructing elaborate canapé towers, while my more ambitious colleagues jockeyed for face time with the executive team. "That's quite the architectural achievement," said a voice behind me. I turned to find Catherine Archer examining my creation, a 3-tiered marvel of crackers, cheese, and those little pastry things with mystery filling. "I minored in structural engineering," I joked, immediately regretting it, because A, it wasn't funny, and B, Catherine Archer doesn't strike me as someone who appreciates self-deprecating humor. Or any humor, really. But she laughed. Not the polite chuckle of professional obligation, but an actual laugh that briefly transformed her from the Catherine Archer into someone almost approachable. "You're Daniel Mercer, right? The brain behind the quantum campaign?" I nodded, surprised she knew my name, let alone my work. The quantum campaign had been successful, yes, but I was firmly middle management, not someone who typically registered on the executive radar. "I've been watching your work for a while now," she continued. "You have a gift for translating technical specifications into emotional connection. We need more of that." And just like that, I was drawn into an actual conversation with the woman, whose signature appeared on my paychecks. We talked marketing strategies, consumer psychology, and the future of the industry. It was exhilarating, being seen, being valued for my professional insights by someone at her level. I should have recognized the warning signs. Her hand lingering a beat too long on my arm, the way she positioned herself just inside the boundary of personal space. The slightly too intimate tone when she said, "We should continue this conversation somewhere quieter." But I was buzzed on attention and validation, and okay, maybe those gin and tonics, floating on the helium of professional recognition. So when she suggested we meet for lunch the following week to discuss expanding my role, I agreed without hesitation. I told Emma, my wife, about it that night, presenting it as a strictly professional opportunity. Because that's all I thought it was. "The Catherine Archer wants to have lunch with you?" Emma raised an eyebrow, impressed, despite herself. Should I be worried? She was joking mostly in that way couples do when one of them receives attention from an objectively attractive person in a position of power. "Absolutely," I deadpanned. "I'm planning to leave you for a woman who probably schedules bathroom breaks and has a personal assistant to chew her food." Emma laughed and swatted my arm. "Just don't forget us little people when you're running the place." If only I'd known then how prophetic those words would become. Not the running the place part, but the forgetting what matters part. That's the thing about moral compromise. It happens incrementally, a series of small capitulations you barely notice until you're standing in the wreckage of your life, wondering how the hell you got there. The lunch was the first step. Catherine took me to the kind of restaurant where the menu doesn't list prices because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. She ordered for both of us in fluent French, then proceeded to outline a vision of my future at Archer Industries that was frankly intoxicating. "I'm creating a new position," she explained between sips of wine that probably cost more than my car payment. "Vice President of Creative Strategy. The role reports directly to me." My heart rate accelerated. A VP position would mean doubling my salary, at minimum. It would mean Lily could go to any college she wanted. It would mean finally paying off the medical bills from Emma's surgery 2 years ago. "I'm flattered," I said carefully, "but there must be more qualified candidates. Janet in Digital has been there longer, and Frank—" "I'm not interested in Janet or Frank," Catherine cut in, her gaze direct in a way that made me slightly uncomfortable. "I'm interested in you." The way she said it, the subtle emphasis on interested, and the way her eyes held mine a beat too long, sent a warning signal pinging through my brain. But then she smoothly pivoted to discussing the details of the role, and I convinced myself I'd misinterpreted. 2 weeks later, I had a new title, a new office with a view of the city, and a new company car. Emma and I celebrated with champagne in plastic cups at our kitchen table after Lily went to bed. "To my brilliant husband," Emma toasted, her eyes bright with pride. "Always knew you were destined for greatness." "To being able to finally fix that leak in the upstairs bathroom," I countered, making her laugh. "It was perfect, until it wasn't." The first inappropriate email arrived a month into my new position. Nothing overtly scandalous, just a message sent at 11:30 p.m. asking if I was still up and wondering if I'd like to continue our discussion from today over drinks sometime. I ignored it, attributing it to the notorious workaholic tendencies of tech executives. The second time was less ambiguous. Catherine invited me to a strategy dinner that turned out to be at her penthouse apartment. When I arrived to find her, in a dress that definitely wasn't standard corporate attire and no other executives in sight, I should have left. Instead, I awkwardly explained that I'd promised to video call my daughter about her science project, fabricated an excuse, and fled. The next day there was a Rolex on my desk. The card read simply, "For all those times you need to check on your daughter's homework. K." I left it in her office with a polite but firm note explaining that I couldn't accept such an extravagant gift. The watch reappeared in my desk drawer. The following morning, this bizarre game of gifting hot potato continued for weeks. I'd return the watch. She'd send something else. Expensive scotch, concert tickets, once even keys to a vacation property in Aspen. "For you and your family." The note read, though the implication that I might use it otherwise hung in the air. Meanwhile, my actual work was thriving. The autonomy and resources of my new position allowed me to implement ideas I'd been pitching for years. Our campaigns were winning awards, our market share was increasing, and my team looked at me with the kind of respect I'd always hoped to earn. For the first time in my career, I felt indispensable, which I realize now was precisely the trap. The ultimatum came during my performance review 6 months into the job. Catherine closed the file containing charts of my department's unprecedented success and fixed me with a look I'd seen her use in board meetings just before executing a corporate guillotining. "You've exceeded every metric, Daniel. You're an undeniable asset to this company." "Thank you," I said, a preemptive knot forming in my stomach. There was a but coming. There's always a but I'm starting to question your commitment to your position. There it was. "I'm not sure I understand," I replied, though I understood perfectly. "Don't you?" She leaned forward. "I've made my interest in you quite clear. Your reluctance is becoming problematic." I shifted uncomfortably. "Catherine, I'm flattered, but I'm happily married." She smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "And I'm happily the CEO of a company currently laying off 15% of its workforce due to economic pressures." The threat couldn't have been clearer if she'd skywritten it. "Are you saying my job depends on—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. "I'm saying choices have consequences. She stood, smoothing her impeccable suit. "The Anderson account needs attention. We could discuss strategy over dinner at my place, or you could clear out your desk and explain to your family why you've joined the unemployment statistics during the worst recession in a decade." She left me sitting there, moral compass spinning wildly like it had suddenly lost true north. I'd like to tell you I walked out immediately, dignity intact. I'd like to tell you I went home and told Emma everything, that we faced the potential financial catastrophe together, that principles trumped pragmatism. But what I actually did was go to Catherine's penthouse that night, leaving Emma with a story about an emergency client meeting. What I actually did was compromise everything I thought I stood for, justifying it as protecting my family while actively betraying them. The affair, if you can dignify something so transactional with, that term continued for 2 months. I became a master of excuses, alibis, and compartmentalization. I convinced myself it was temporary, just until the economy improved and I could find another position. I convinced myself Emma and Lily would never know, that this sin of omission was actually an act of protection. The universe, with its impeccable sense of ironic timing, had other plans. The unraveling began with a misdirected email. Catherine sent a rather explicit message meant for me to an address that auto-completed to Emma Mercer instead of Daniel Mercer, courtesy of an IT system update that synced personal contact information across platforms. By the time I realized what had happened, Emma had already read enough to understand exactly what kind of client meetings had been keeping me late at the office. I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, my packed suitcase by the door. "How long?" she asked, her voice frighteningly calm. I considered lying, but what was the point? The evidence was literally in her inbox. 2 months, because of the promotion? Or did that come after? After, I admitted. But it's not what you think. She threatened my job. We need the income, the insurance. I was trying to protect us. Protect us? Emma's laugh was a brittle, broken thing. By sleeping with your boss while I'm at home helping Lily with her homework? That's not protection, Daniel. That's cowardice. I had no defense. She was right. I'll end it, I promised. Tomorrow, I'll find another job. It doesn't matter anymore. Emma stood, and I noticed for the first time that her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, as if she'd moved beyond tears to something harder and more permanent. Lily overheard us. She's at my sister's. We'll be staying there until we figure out next steps. Emma, please, don't. She held up a hand. You made a choice, Daniel. Now you get to live with the consequences. She left, and the house fell into a silence so complete I could hear the second hand on my watch, the one I'd finally accepted, from Catherine, ticking away moments of a life I'd systematically destroyed. 3 days later, I walked into my office to find Julian Reed sitting in my chair. Julian, with his MBA from Wharton, his absurdly symmetrical face, and his reputation for spectacular career advancement. I'd been hearing his name for weeks, Catherine's new golden boy, the financial wunderkind who was going to revolutionize our business model. Daniel, Catherine said from the doorway, her voice professionally pleasant. Thank you for coming in. I wanted to inform you personally about our restructuring decisions. And just like that, I was packaged out, given a severance that would cover exactly 3 months of mortgage payments and escorted to my car by security, that cardboard box of belongings my only souvenir from the spectacular implosion of my professional and personal lives. Rock bottom arrived with stunning efficiency. Within 2 weeks, I was living in a depressing studio apartment, my calls to Emma going straight to voicemail, my texts to Lily receiving only sporadic one-word responses. I had enough savings to postpone financial panic for a few months, but my professional reputation was contaminated by whatever story Catherine was undoubtedly circulating about my departure. It's remarkable how quickly self-pity can curdle into something darker and more potent. I found myself obsessively tracking Archer Industries press releases, scouring industry blogs for mentions of Catherine and her new protégé. Julian was everywhere, quoted in the Wall Street Journal, photographed alongside Catherine at industry events, his hand resting just a bit too proprietarily on the small of her back. History repeating itself, with me cast in the role of cautionary, poor tale. The turning point came via LinkedIn, of all places. A former colleague from my pre-Archer days messaged me about a position at his company, adding, "Heard what happened with Archer. You're not the first, you know. Reed's got quite the reputation." 3 hours and several increasingly specific Google searches later, I had uncovered Julian Reed's modus operandi. Join a company, charm his way into the confidence, and often the bed, of a female executive, manipulate his way into a position with significant financial control, then disappear along with company assets. He'd done it at least twice before, though both companies had hushed it up to avoid embarrassment. My first instinct was to warn Catherine. Despite everything, there was a part of me, the part that still believed in basic human decency, that couldn't stand by while someone else was defrauded. I drafted an email, then deleted it, wrote another, deleted that too. Because here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. It gives you perfect clarity about who put you there. Catherine had used me, discarded me, and destroyed my family in the process. Her impending financial disaster felt less like tragedy and more like cosmic justice. So instead of warning her, I created an anonymous email account. Instead of alerting her to Julian's pattern, I sent him information that would accelerate his con. Internal financial documents I still had access to through a cloud storage oversight. Insights about Catherine's decision-making vulnerabilities. Suggestions for how to fast-track his takeover of crucial systems. Consider this a professional courtesy, I wrote in my final message, from one disposable asset to another. I expected to feel vindicated as I watched events unfold from afar. Catherine announced a strategic partnership with Julian, giving him an unprecedented equity stake after just 3 months with the company. The board approved his proposal to restructure financial operations, centralizing control under his department. Catherine began appearing with him socially. Their relationship clearly evolved beyond the professional. All according to Julian's established pattern, now proceeding at record speed thanks to my behind-the-scenes assistance. But vindication never came. Instead, I felt increasingly hollow, recognizing that I'd become just another link in a chain of exploitation and betrayal. My revenge wasn't healing anything. It was just spreading the damage to include more collateral casualties, the employees, who would lose jobs when Julian decimated the company, the clients who would be left in the lurch, the investors who would lose their money. I'd become the villain in not just my own story, but in a much larger narrative. So I stopped. Deleted the anonymous email account. Started therapy, applied for jobs far from the tech sector, began the humbling process of apologizing to Emma and Lily, not to win them back. I'd forfeited that right, but because they deserved acknowledgement of the harm I'd caused. Emma agreed to coffee once to discuss logistics of our separation. Lily permitted me to attend her school play, though she made it clear I should sit at least 5 rows behind her mother. Small mercies that felt monumental given what I deserved. 3 months after I sent my last anonymous tip to Julian, the news broke. Julian Reed had disappeared, along with approximately $20 million in company funds and proprietary technology. Archer Industries' stock plummeted. Layoffs were announced. Catherine Archer stepped down as CEO pending an investigation. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not even the bitter comfort of, "I told you so," that I couldn't actually say to anyone. Just emptiness, and the growing certainty that no chain of retribution ever leads to redemption. The text from an unknown number arrived a week later. "I need to speak with you. It's urgent." I ignored it. Then another came. "I know what you did, and what I did. Please, Daniel. One conversation. One." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory, public enough to discourage dramatics. Catherine Archer looked nothing like the poised executive who had systematically dismantled my life. Her designer clothing had been replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. The imperious confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked disconcertingly like humility. Thank you for coming, she said, and I was startled to realize she actually meant it. What do you want, Catherine? Your help. She leaned forward. Julian took everything: money, intellectual property, client relationships. The company is imploding, but you know our systems, our clients. You could help me rebuild? I stared at her, momentarily speechless. You can't be serious. I'll make you a partner. Equal stake. Complete creative control. The desperation in her voice was almost painful to hear. I know I treated you terribly, but we were good together professionally. We could be again. Treated me terribly is quite the euphemism for sexual coercion and career destruction, I replied, keeping my voice steady with effort. Not to mention what your actions did to my family. She had the grace to look ashamed. I regret that more than you know. But this is a chance to start over, for both of us. I considered her offer, surprised to find no trace of satisfaction in seeing her reduced to pleading. There was only weariness, and the clarity that comes from finally understanding your own worth. I'm afraid I must decline, I said finally. I've stopped rescuing people who drown in their own ambition. You knew about Julian, she said, realization dawning. You could have warned me. Yes. Why didn't you? I stood, gathering my coat. For the same reason you didn't consider the consequences of your actions on my life. At the time, it didn't seem relevant to your interests. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Is this your revenge, then? Watching me lose everything? I paused, considering the question. No, Catherine. This isn't revenge. It's consequence. There's a difference. I walked out of the coffee shop feeling neither triumphant nor bitter, just unburdened, as if I'd finally set down a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. Last week, I accepted a marketing position with a small environmental nonprofit. The salary is exactly half what I made at Archer. The office is a converted warehouse with questionable heating, and my desk is actually just a door balanced on 2 filing cabinets. But my boss is a retired biology professor who wants to save the world and doesn't care if I leave early on Thursdays for Lily's soccer games, which, miraculously, I've been invited to attend again. Emma and I are not getting back together. Some betrayals can't be undone, only accepted and learned from. But last Sunday, she suggested we all have dinner together, her, Lily, and me. A family meal, if not a reunited family. I'm not doing this for you, she clarified as we stood in her kitchen afterward, washing dishes side by side like we used to. I'm doing it for Lily, and for me, because I'm tired of organizing our lives around anger. I understand, I said, and I did. Thank you for the invitation, regardless of the reason. She handed me a plate to dry, our fingers brushing briefly, in the exchange. Catherine Archer filed for bankruptcy. Did you hear? It was in the business section. I didn't know, I said truthfully. I'd stopped tracking the collapse of my former employer. Emma studied me for a moment. You're different now. I'm trying to be, I admitted. Not for any reward or reconciliation, just because I need to be someone I can live with. She nodded, turning back to the sink, but as I was leaving, she said something that felt like the first breath after being underwater. I think Lily might be ready for lunch with you next weekend. Just the 2 of you. As I drove home to my shabby apartment with its secondhand furniture and view of a parking lot rather than the city skyline, I realized I felt something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Hope. Not for restoration of what was lost, that chapter is closed, but for the possibility of writing a new story, one where I'm neither hero nor villain, just a flawed human being doing the hard, unglamorous work of becoming better. It's not revenge. It's not even redemption, really. It's just consequence. And finally, one I can live with.